Interesting. Hey, look at here, lad. The second largest mammal on Earth.
Oh. And which one is the largest mammal on Earth? The first one?
Your mama!
Of course it is.
Hey, what's that in your wrist?
This?
Yes.
This is a tattoo.
Is it like a drawing carved on skin?
Yes, you could say that. It's permanent. Mr. Thorsten, do you have any tattoos?
Oh, yes, I have one down in me back.
Down on your back?
Oh, yes, right at the center, where my back ends and my bum begins.
Well, what is it?
My bum? Well, it's me yours.
No, I mean, the tattoo, what is it?
Oh, it's this right here. Ah, magic.
3 wands, kind of reversed, but what does it mean?
Oh, it means...
Oh, I know! 111th, Bilbo Baggins' birthday party at the beginning of The Lord of the Rings. Mr. Thorsten, I didn't know you were a fan of Tolkien's works.
What in the devil is the Lord of Baggins and who's Bill Tolkien? No, that's not what this means. These are Lokan's runes. The L rune.
Oh, I see, 3 L's. L is 50 in Roman, right? So 3 times 50, 150.
Oh, no, lad, don't hurt yourself. You are trying to find a deeper and complex meaning in something so simple. It's just 3 L's.
So, what does that stand for?
Live, laugh, and love.
I mean, as long as it's important to you and it makes sense, I mean, all is well, I think.
Oh, yes, I think it's quite poetic. True and simple words to live by.
Hello, my dear friends. How have you been? I'm Mario Theriger, and today I'm going to talk about a few historical factors concerning the runes. And I'll try to be brief and cover as much as possible in this video, especially in relation to tattoos. I'm not going to talk about the historical evidences of runic tattoos in pre-Christian Scandinavia, mind you, because I have already made a video about that concerning that subject, a video about tattoos in the Viking Age, in the Viking period. So given the information on that video, I think the same thing can be applied to the runes as tattoos. However, this video may prove to be useful concerning the runic or rune tattoos people do nowadays. There's a lot of wrong information circulating all over the internet, as always, and many people, many of us, are led into misconceptions and then end up recreating and feeding upon those same misconceptions. And when it comes to make tattoos of runes or tattooing phrases and texts written in runes, a lot of errors occur. So this video might help some people, I hope, avoiding those mistakes, precisely to avoid future regrets in life when they choose runes and runic characters as tattoos. Now, first things first, before we really begin this video. For those of you who have been in this channel for quite some time, you have probably noticed that the folder where I usually place the videos concerning Scandinavian and Viking studies now also has Runology in it, in the title. And I also have a specific folder entitled The Runes. I've made this to differentiate between academic works concerning the runes from the videos where I give my own esoteric understanding of the runes. So this might create a little bit of confusion because usually both the scientific study of the runes and the esoteric study of the runes are both called Runology. The scientific discipline that deals with runes is Runology. There's no mistake. By Runology, we understand an academic study aiming to analyze texts written in runes, historical evidences in order to trace their historical evolution and development and the evolutionary processes of various runiforms as an expression of a language, and also translations and meanings in historical context. Therefore, it has nothing to do with the other runology, understood as an esoteric activity designed to predict the future, using the runes as a divinatory process or art, which is quite common in contemporary neo-pagan circles or neo-pagan religious manifestations. Unfortunately, this difference is only more perceptible or noticeable in the academic world, So scientific runology is often mixed with the esoteric one, which leads many of us to believe that the esoteric understanding and meaning of runes, which only appears from the late 19th century onwards, to be something of the historical past, and that such modern esoteric meanings and divinatory arts with the runes were already understood like that and practiced as such by the peoples of the past, which isn't true at all. It isn't the case. In the vast majority of cases, actually, historical facts are rarely used to support esoteric understandings. And the reverse also often happens, of course. Esoteric understandings end up entering the scientific study, modifying the historical past, building a completely different and alternative history that never existed. Therefore, it is necessary to know how to differentiate these two realities. That is why I've made this differentiation on this channel. All academic videos regarding the study of the runes I will put in the folder entitled Scandinavian and Viking Studies and Runology. All other videos on the esoteric meaning of each rune and their use for divination, well, they will continue to be submitted in the folder entitled The Runes. Just the runes. So now let's start our today's video, please. There are several types of runes that belong to distinctive writing systems, including runic symbols or whose shape displays a rune-like characteristic in prehistoric times. Therefore, we put each system in the category of runiforms. Runiforms as the term to describe many different scripts or inscriptions, especially those found in other cultural contexts not related to Germanic peoples, whose forms are similar to the written forms and letters that were used in runic scripts. Just give me a second. Oi. Das ist all. Sol. Eise. Sorry. Sorry. As I was saying, runiforms is the term to describe many different scripts or inscriptions, especially those found in other cultural contexts not related to Germanic peoples, whose forms are similar to the written forms and letters that were used in runic scripts used to write various Germanic languages. Well, I'm not going to talk about the various runiforms that exist, nor will I speak about the origins of the runes as a whole. Instead, let me briefly share with you the origins of the runes in Germanic context only. Runes, as a system of writing and a formed alphabet, are introduced and subsequently used as a form of written expression in the Germanic cultural context in Central and Northern Europe from the 2nd century of the Common Era onwards. And their developments, well, it is due to the contact of the Germanic tribes with the Romans. Again, I'm not talking about other runiforms, runic scripts, that appear even before the peoples of the Italic Peninsula had runiform writing systems in the Iron Age. I'm specifically talking about the runes in Germanic context alone. The earliest surviving runic inscription in Germanic cultural context possibly dates from the late 2nd century of the Common Era, which is found in a brooch found in Meldorf in northern Germany. The characters in that artifact are runiform but match Roman letters, having a more runic appearance to facilitate the carving on the object. But there's still some controversy over this specific finding. Other early findings are concentrated in southern Scandinavia. However, most of these rune inscriptions are on portable objects. And this is very important to take into consideration, since we know from the archaeological record, the archaeological context, that people in ancient Europe had extensive networks of trade and the exchange of goods and ideas. So we cannot assume that a particular object was made or inscribed near to where it was deposited or found later on by archaeology. In fact, the concentration of findings in Denmark may not represent what we think it represents. That being these early artifacts with runic inscriptions having been made in Denmark, or even inscribed, the inscriptions themselves having been done by Germanic peoples. It is in this very region, Denmark, that there seems to have been a practice of deliberately depositing objects in bogs, which means these objects may not in fact have been created in Denmark, but imported from elsewhere. This is a practice that occurred very often throughout the Iron Age, and still in practice throughout the Viking period in Scandinavia and the early Nordic Middle Ages. Important objects that were important, were acquired, traded, stolen, bought, and then brought to Denmark and being deposited as offerings. So the fact that the earliest runic inscriptions in Germanic context are found in Denmark doesn't necessarily mean that such objects and inscriptions were created by the Germanic tribes of the Iron Age inhabiting those regions in Denmark, nowadays Denmark. The first thing we learn in archaeology is that objects travel more than people. So at this point, with all the studies that have been conducted thus far, there's little doubt that the runes are an adaptation from Mediterranean alphabets, possibly even from Iberian Atlantic runiforms, which appear to be the earliest runiforms in Europe. However, for Germanic peoples, the runes were introduced to them by the Romans. Therefore, I repeat, the runes introduced in Germanic context, cultural context, were modeled after the Latin alphabet, and not from one of the similar alphabets in use in the Atlantic Iberian Peninsula, nor in northern Italy. In the case of northern Italy, runes in the Germanic context were thought to be an Etruscan influence. However, it is not, because in this particular case, northern Italy and Etruscan, we would expect to find a tremendous amount of runic findings on the border between the cultural world of northern Italy and the Germanic one, in current southern Germany. But that never happened. As I said, the oldest runic inscriptions in Germanic context are found in Denmark and parts of southern Sweden. So it really seems to be a case of transporting objects from the Roman context to the Germanic context, as well as, obviously, transporting ideas, even mythological and religious concepts, and also the transportation of Latin writing systems adapted to the Germanic languages, of course. Many of the runes bear a formal resemblance to Greek and or Roman letters, with similar sound values. For instance, the rune S, and the Roman S, and Old Italic character S, and the Greek sigma character for the S sound. And closer correspondences can also be found with letters from other alphabets used in Italy or in the Alpine region, such as Etruscan and Phoenician. Indeed, it's likely that the runes were indeed introduced to Germanic peoples via Romans and Greeks, and with a possible connection with the Phoenician alphabet. The ancient region of Phoenicia was situated on the modern Lebanese coast, with adjoining parts of modern Syria and Israel. And we do find a lot of similarities based on several Phoenician letter names, which have striking parallels with rune names, but that is for another video. There's no doubt that ancient Germanic peoples had substantial contact with cultures in the wider Mediterranean world, and this is quite noticeable since the Bronze Age at least, and the petroglyphic boat-shaped motifs in Scandinavia that also match several such motifs all across the southern Atlantic world and the Mediterranean, and Africa also, and Middle East. There are also Bronze Age engravings on stone in Scandinavia, especially in Norway, of Greek letters, the Greek characters, etc. A lot of examples. I understand that many scholars in the 19th century painted a picture of Scandinavia as an isolated area, and nowadays it's still tempting to think of Scandinavia and neighboring regions as a remote, isolated area inhabited by a people apart from the civilized world. But in reality, the peoples of Northern Europe were part of an extensive network which traded in a variety of goods, as well as in aspects of culture, including writing systems, which facilitated, obviously, the communication while trading and exchanging goods with others. During the 19th and the early 20th centuries, there was a great mixture between esotericism applied to the runes with their scientific study. In fact, archaeology at that time was still quite amateur and in fact, an absolute disgrace. It was a disaster. Archaeology only really became a real science with its own methodologies in the 50s of the 20th century. From then on, surely archaeology, at least in the last couple of decades, revealed an extensive and a very intense existence of contacts between the Romans and Scandinavian cultural worlds. Once again, Denmark is a good example. It is rich in coins and artifacts of the Roman cultural world, although it has never been under Roman control, which demonstrates precisely an extensive contact with the Mediterranean. But even though runes in the Germanic context are an adaptation of the Latin alphabet, the Germanic peoples, especially in Denmark in the Iron Age, developed their own runic systems from there on. And of course, they are developments that better adapt and fit in the Germanic languages, shaping Latin characters for the purpose of writing and expressing Germanic languages. So many runes present, both in form and sound, important differences when compared to Latin characters. So in the Germanic world, we have runes identical to Latin characters, others with only a few similarities, and others are completely original, borrowing a writing system and then shape it to fit into the linguistic reality. Then it resulted in the creation of the rune rows, which take the name of Futhark, from the first letters that compose them. The oldest runic inscriptions are found in everyday objects. Normally, people engrave their own names on everyday objects, utensils, and a variety of daily items, even weapons that belong to them. This is mine because it has my name on it. And the use of runes in a celebratory context, especially on rune stones and rune stone monuments and grave markers, started to spread by the end of the Iron Age and only in Scandinavia. But of course, there are also objects such as bracelets, medallions, bracteates, and amulets that have extremely synthetic inscriptions and are difficult to interpret, not least because we know almost nothing about the entity that produced them. By entity meaning we don't know which general industry produced such items, especially the case of the bracteates, which were produced in mass, clearly by a specific industry at that time whose aim was to recreate these objects based on the medallions worn by Roman soldiers. So we can only rely on archaeology, but with a lot of uncertainties and assumptions, sadly. Precisely by the difficulties in interpreting runes in certain objects, especially due to the lack of concrete knowledge of the language present in these objects, in some of these objects, these objects are often interpreted as having a magical value, which happens quite a lot in archaeology. Everything that does not have a perceptible or immediate function and meaning falls into the category of magical religious context. That is why the idea of a magical power associated with runes and each rune was created in the first place. This time an error made by amateur archaeology. Most of the time when it is said that an inscription have a magical value or even an item, an object, it must be understood that in reality what is implied is that we have absolutely no idea what it means. So this happens a lot. As an archaeologist myself, as an example, I remember being in an archaeological excavation, prehistoric context, from the Neolithic context, where a little carved bone was found presenting an anthropomorphic form. And as no one knew what it was or its true function, it was immediately considered a magical religious object, an idol, perhaps even the representation of a deity. And this object was in exhibition for some years, a couple of years, in a museum, and designated as such as a magical religious object. A few years later, I received news that the object we had found had already been identified compared to other historical contexts, and it's actually a Neolithic ear piercing. So, the exact same thing happens concerning the runes on certain objects, especially of the Iron Age. They are magical objects until finally the purpose and what the inscription says is finally revealed. There are a lot of academic works. Sorry, again. So as I was saying, there are a lot of old academic works now completely obsolete that speak of magical inscriptions in certain objects that contain runes when it was not yet known what they meant. And in the meantime, the meaning was unveiled and always ends up being either names or people's names or jokes, but sometimes also messages of love or Olaf was here. Of course, this doesn't mean that it is wrong to use the runes for magical purposes or even in divination methods. I do it, many people do it, but it's important to differentiate between the historical truths and what we really know from the modern displays of faith and magic associated with the runes. So we don't mix things together and end up making a fool of ourselves in each context. There's a time and space for everything, I believe. Modern neo-pagan conceptions, assumptions, and all magical works are seldom the reflection of the historical past. We do what we do what works best for us, but we should be aware of the real historical facts in order to avoid mistakes. In the past few decades, especially since the 1980s, the use of runes in divination has developed quite a lot. There are many books on the matter on this subject and even kits with runes. And in this specific case, each letter, each runic character of an alphabet is seen as a magical symbol in itself, which encloses a special power in it, usually related to its name. Names that the vast majority are recent reconstructions and constructions in the field of philology. So indeed, current religious developments which are not actually supported by ancient historical and archaeological sources. As I said in the previous video about Galdrastafi, there are no texts that illustrate the magical value of each rune of the runic alphabets, and the few literary passages that seem to demonstrate. Sorry again. As I was saying, there are no texts that illustrate the magical value of each letter of the runic alphabets, and the few literary passages that seem to suggest a magical value of the runes are in reality very ambiguous and may well refer to magic formulas written by using runes as letters. I've already talked about this in another video about talismans in Nordic witchcraft. And in fact, the runes were not understood to have a magical value, but instead were used as a written form to express a magical character, a magical intention, used to write incantations, invocations, charms, etc. The runes did not give magic to the incantations or the objects. The runes were simply used to write magical formulas in the same way we put together the letters of our own alphabets nowadays to write anything else, including magical formulas as well. And I want to express that this magical and esoteric use of runes, despite being a modern phenomenon of neo-pagan religious manifestations and therefore disconnected from the historical past of this writing system, is, in my opinion, a legitimate phenomenon. It is an evolution of the history of religions, and that is quite important. So, historical facts may create demotivation in some people, I understand that, but I see no reason why this would lead neo-pagans to stop using the runes as magical symbols. Religion and tradition are meant to evolve, must always evolve, towards what is most appealing to us, what helps us to be happy and helps us in personal development and personal evolution, and also helps us to approach the magical religious aspects of life, because, well, magic and mystery must always be present because they enrich our cultures and enhance or at the very least instigate human creativity. So there are several runic alphabets because, well, Germanic languages have evolved, so different systems have been developed to represent different developments of sounds and of course runes as letters of an alphabet to represent those same sounds. That is why it is important to know these linguistic developments, because runes are often equated with letters and sounds of modern languages and used as such. And this can cause some errors when we choose certain runes to express modern languages. I think it's necessary to have a clear understanding of the historical location of each runic alphabet and its corresponding language in order to avoid making a wrong mixture between each runic alphabet with historical periods, monuments, and objects that have nothing to do with these alphabets. Nowadays, the most well-known and most used runic alphabet is the so-called Elder Futhark, which appears often mixed together with Viking iconography. In fact, the Elder Futhark is often called Viking runes and associated with the Old Norse gods even, which is completely wrong, as the Elder Futhark specifically is an earlier development not used to express Old Norse language, and it was neither a development during the historical Scandinavian period often called Viking Age or Viking era, nor was it in use during that same period. The Elder Futhark disappeared and fell completely out of use in the century prior to the beginning of the period that is generally referred to as the Viking period, the 8th century. So the use of the Elder Futhark completely stopped even before the 8th century. So it really is a mistake to speak of the Elder Futhark as being an alphabet used in Scandinavia during the Viking era or being Viking runes. And in a time when people spoke Old Norse, to be more precise. The Elder Futhark was never used to write in Old Norse. The language is completely different, and Old Norse by itself required a different alphabet, a shorter one even, to fit into this new language development, which is the one often called Younger Futhark. In the last roughly 3 centuries of the first millennium of the Common Era, or better still, the period generally known as the Viking period in Scandinavia, roughly 3 centuries, a simplified runic alphabet called Younger Futhark spread in Scandinavia. So this one right here on the screen is the proper alphabet for writing in Old Norse language. It is really this one that we can associate with Scandinavians in the Scandinavian late Iron Age and the beginning of the Nordic Middle Ages. So, having said all that has been discussed here, of course, runes are a very common choice for tattoos. It is exotic, it is different, it is mysterious, but of course, also among neo-pagans whose religious beliefs are based on Nordic polytheism, tattooing runes has a religious and spiritual significance, and it is an important aspect for many. And that is why it is good to be aware of the historical contexts so as not to make mistakes. This is the exact problem. Runes are often used incorrectly. For instance, the old version of the Futhark, the Elder Futhark, is often used to write in modern English or modern Icelandic or even medieval Icelandic and Old Norse or modern Scandinavian languages. But these languages and these different phases of the historical development of these languages have been represented in the past using different runic alphabets, different runiforms, and not the Elder Futhark. And when some letter of a modern language and the sound of that same letter has no representation in a specific runic alphabet, well, another rune from a completely different runic alphabet will be used to match the letter we are looking for. And then it's a big mixture of different historical developments and of languages, and it actually creates a lot of confusion when trying to read runic tattoos or rune tattoos. In fact, it often leads to several mistakes. And I'm going to show you an example. I'm not trying to make fun of anyone. I just want to show you something to better illustrate all of this. And this picture right here on the screen was sent to me by a friend of mine. Hey, buddy, if you are watching this, well, nothing occurs to me at the moment. Stay safe, don't get stabbed, and don't be kicked in the chest by a horse. They are out there lurking, waiting for you to make a mistake. And this advice goes for all of you. Well, this is a bloody mess, this example right here, and it says, hold Vikingen way. So the first problem we encounter is actually murdering the English language. If you don't know a language, why on earth would you even use an historical runic alphabet to express it? Anyway, clearly the idea was to write, I assume, Old Viking way. However, we have several other problems here. The person is using the Elder Futhark to write in English, possibly because the Elder Futhark has more letters, so it will be easier to find matches for the Latin letters used in modern English. But the person is speaking about the Vikings, the Old Viking way. So it would be more fitting to use a runic alphabet that was actually historically used by Scandinavians during the Viking period to express Old Norse language. And that is the Younger Futhark we have seen before, and I'll put it right here on the screen again so you can compare it by yourself, and pause the video if you must, obviously, of course. Clearly, the first letter is wrong, it shouldn't be there, but since it is, the H sound and the representative rune letter in the Younger Futhark is the one I'll put in here on the screen, and clearly not this one from the Elder Futhark. But since it's in English, there isn't much of a problem, I think, because the Anglo-Saxon runes have an H sound and a representative rune to express Old English, which is quite similar to this one. However, Old English isn't modern English. But well, the list of this person's problems, as we shall see. The next rune to represent the O letter is definitely from the Elder Futhark, because there's no Viking Age rune that can properly represent that letter. The closest of the Younger Futhark is this one right here, which is actually a development of Hansos, so the A sound, Ha sound. But the Old Norse could also be used to represent the O sound, which is Os, but not quite the Latin letter, obviously. And the K representation is also wrong. It should be Con right here, since the idea is to honor the old Viking ways. So just go ahead and use the alphabet the Vikings were actually using, and not one they didn't know about, and in fact were never actually aware of it. As by the Viking period, as I said, the Elder Futhark had fallen into disuse more than a century prior to the very beginning of the Viking period. And then we have a problematic representation, the Elder Futhark rune to represent the N sound, or the N sound and N sound, often characterized as the Ing rune or the Ingwas rune. This rune, along a few others, enter in the category of problematic cases, of runes of uncertain source and development. And aside from this Elder Futhark rune, there's only one other development, which is found in the Anglo-Saxon runes, again, to express this sound in the Old English language. There is no rune to express this particular sound and letter, or junction of letters that creates a specific sound in the Old Norse language, in the Younger Futhark, therefore not found in the Younger Futhark. And then, of course, the rune I've skipped previously, but we see it again in the last word, way, the rune representative of the V and W sound. The best representation of the V sound in Old Norse is actually the same rune used for the F sound, which actually makes the V sound more like F and F more like V. And I think the best example I can give you is actually the modern German word Vieh, which means cattle, and it's precisely with cattle that this rune is often associated with. And the best rune of the Younger Futhark to represent the W is actually Hurus, the same used for the letter U.
and the sound U, right? Which is why usually people go for the elder Futhark, especially when writing in modern languages, because they find no match in other language developments that used runiforms. So it would actually be easier to make this tattoo with the runes if the person had actually chosen Old Norse language. Therefore, the runes associated to that specific language would fit better, perfectly actually, and no mistakes would be made. So if you allow me, we can somewhat translate this into Old Norse. As you well know, Vikings were not a people, but a Viking was a way of life, an activity, mostly seasonal activity. It could include piracy, of course, trading also, even exploration. The point here is navigating, usually on water. So a Viking was actually a seafarer as a general term. So Vikings in plural as seafarers, the best translation is flotnar. But that doesn't sound very daring and adventurous, I know. So we could go for vikingar, and an Old Norse term for the old way would probably be, of course, sither, which is not literally old ways, but rather a long-lasting custom that seems to have encompassed both religion, traditional customs, folk traditions and folk magic, and a long-lasting attitude towards the surrounding world and behavior towards that same world based on the old belief systems. A reflection of a long-lasting tradition, right? So perhaps the tattoo would be something between the lines of Vikingar Sidri or just Vikingar Sither. And in that way, it's easier to use the proper runic alphabet. But please, don't take this example I'm giving as really the appropriate one. Mind you that my field of expertise is history and archaeology, which forces me to also delve into the field of philology and other fields, of course, sometimes. But there are experts in Old Norse language you should definitely consult and see what's the best approach to take in here in this specific subject, such as Dr. Jackson Crawford. Many of you already know him around here at YouTube, and I honestly think he's one of the best nowadays to be consulted in Old Norse language. So, it is always good to be aware of linguistic developments and the runes associated with these same linguistic developments, because that is also how many forgeries are identified. And I am not only talking about books and the recreations of jewelry and other objects. I also speak of archaeological falsifications that were made in the past to prove certain political theories. Every once in a while, someone tries to make more falsifications of this sort, more forgeries, to pass as an archaeological finding, a reliable source. But nowadays, thank the gods, there is a lot more information and it's easier to notice forgeries. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope it was useful. My apologies for Sol, one of my cats, and that one sleeping in there is Gigi. Kilta ducks. Hey. Das ist auch. Hey, sir. Never mind. Anyway, once again, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, tá por aí. Thanks for today. Obrigado por hoje.